why don't you do a question and answer video? How about right now? Hey, Daniel Hartman, Community Machinery, Sackville, New Brunswick, and just gonna go through some questions and answers. So, seriously, why not do some videos where you work on a project? Yes, I would love to do videos working on a project. It's one of those things that's daunting as far as the editing, and usually a project gets broken down into lots of components, and often I spend a lot of time stopping and thinking about things and jumping around between several projects at once. So logistically, it seems like a really large thing for me that I haven't found a way to really bring it together yet. But I would love to do that, especially if someone else is going to do the filming and editing. What is your favorite place in the shop? Well, actually, it's right where I'm sitting now, pretty much, as far as I love being here around the milling machine. It's got this feeling of precision and that I can control things. And it's just a nice, familiar place. And it's one of the things I feel like I do a little bit better with. And it's one of those things when I was younger, it's maybe where more I fantasized about being. It's pretty clean. It's one thing I don't enjoy about welding so much is, I mean, the TIG welding could be really clean, but I enjoy it over here. I love measuring tools. And actually, I know one of the other questions was, what tool do you find yourself always reaching for? That's definitely these Mitutoyo calipers that I love that they can be zeroed in terms of if there's a size I want to duplicate, that I can just open it up, set it to 0, and then when the calipers close, I know how much bigger it is, especially like turning things on the lathe. If I zero my final size, then I've got a little countdown to where it goes. The only thing you gotta watch is if you're on the other side of 0, you could think you have a little bit to go and you're a little bit too far. So that's one of those things you gotta watch. It'd be nice if, like in a spreadsheet, you can set the numbers so when it goes negative numbers to a red number or something like that. Anyhow, it's one of those you just gotta watch for. It's things come with experience. And so I love that, and I love it being able to switch between metric and imperial, especially figuring out nuts and bolts, bearings. Measuring bearings is a big deal. I just sorted out all the imperial bearings and metric bearings yesterday, which is one of my favorite recent shop improvements, because often prototyping something, it's easy to get cold rolled steel and different material in imperial sizes for making things, which is great when there's imperial bearings around. But metric bearings are usually a lot cheaper and in some ways more available in certain sizes than imperial bearings. So there's a catch-22, and it depends what you're using for a bearing housing. Sometimes the metric size is easier because often the OD, whatever's holding the OD, needs to be machined because nothing is that precise on the ID to mate with the OD of the bearing. So anyhow, calipers super handy. And one thing, I bought a used pair of 6-inch Mitutoyo calipers a while back, not realizing that they only measure metric, which so much of the functionality isn't being able to convert from or be able to do both, because one part of the job might be a metric, another part might be an imperial. And I think it's one of those things, we're never really going to get away from having multiple systems of measuring units at the same time. Even some things in the metric system, I think Japan used some British standards for hydraulic fittings and different things. So we'll never get away from it, it seems. Anyhow, that's my... So, how do you decide what projects are a good fit? That is a great question, because there's actually a little sign over here. This and what things are help make the world friendlier, safer, higher quality, simpler, more efficient. That is our gold standard. That's an oversimplification in a lot of ways, because it's really the stories that tell what those things are, or the value of being able to tell stories to illustrate what those things really are. I mean, what is friendlier, and what? Oh, look at that. That's gonna be fun. I'm not editing that out. So really having a cultural story that helps everyone discern what those things are, and that's always going to be a work in progress. But that's just a general reference, general framework for discerning what projects are a good fit. Because at the end of the day, you can have the greatest machines in the world and you can hang out in a place like this, but it's really about people and how we connect to things that, there's not infinite meaning in these machines, but having a human connection, having a connection with living things, the world, or even seeing things on a deeper level, sometimes it's tough to do in a machine shop. There's parts of it that are really brilliant and making something that's really beautiful, that's really fun, but there's also something to having a variety of things going on. Anyhow, I'm getting way out there. So, what is most important? Oh, I remember this question because I actually previewed this, but I've tried to forget it so it would be really candid on camera. So, when I think about business planning, which is one of these things that I'm always working on, always working to refine, this idea of purpose over profit in terms of being able to put the brakes on, especially when there's apprentices and students working in the shop, sometimes there's co-op students. So being able to slow things down. And I remember being an apprentice, and when things from my personal life were affecting my work quality, there wasn't always someone to slow things down and really say, hey, what's going on with you? And a lot of times I remember asking adults that I really respected to try and find insight on why things were throwing me off so much. And they were just, their eyes would glaze over, they just had this blank stare, just kind of look away. And I've really made an effort in my life to go and dig for deeper answers and to really be there and to be able to emotionally sit with that. Sometimes that means inviting someone to take a deep breath, or maybe it'll bring tears to my eyes, and just allowing that emotion to be there. I love that Brene Brown video about empathy, where there's an animated one where there's a rabbit and a bear. They go on the hole of despair. Anyhow, and they both have this storm cloud over their heads, and actually the rabbit I think grabs the storm cloud, or the bear anyhow, and grabs the storm cloud from over the other animal's head and shares it with them, and goes into that feeling. I feel like that is really more important than just building things, being there on the journey, and that makes things in the shop work so much better. The counterintuitive part is sometimes it seems like you really got to slow down in order for things to sometimes get better. There's a big challenge I find in terms of people, especially people I know who are in business, finding people to hire. And here I try not to hire anyone. I just want to partner with people. I want to find people who have the same passion, not people who just want to punch in and go home with a paycheck at the end of the day, but want to be invested. I want to be invested in other people, and I want them to be invested in what goes on here. So one of the big challenges, if there's not a really wide range of things to go on, and there's no way to take time out of the day, or to take a day off, or if money's got to be coming in the bank account all the time to keep the wolves from being at the door, it can be really tough. And I know I take a lot of time with myself personally to get my emotions lined up before I jump into something. So if there's not some really basic projects or things to get some momentum and things to build some confidence and some entry level tasks that are fun to do when things aren't working so well and everyone's got to be on point all the time, that's a really tall order, and it's really tough, I would find, to maintain a small workforce. Someone once pointed out, if you're a single person business and you're hiring your first employee, you're doubling your workforce, which is crazy. So theoretically, it would be easier to grow a bigger company because you're not doubling your number. Anyhow, enough said on that topic. So here's one related to the shop. Can you duplicate this tool I have? So I was thinking about, someone asked me about something like a bulb planter the other day, which is, pretty simple hand tool. Not that much different than a shovel, except it takes a little plug of earth, and then you can put your bulb in the ground, and something like that. They're produced by the thousands upon thousands, even though not many people have a bulb planter. So projects like that, unless someone was using that thing every day and they needed some kind of particular modification to make it more efficient, so it's actually going to pay itself off. For someone who's using something once a year, it's often not that viable. Actually, there's another example that I just posted on Instagram today. Someone wanted a mount to put a winch in the floor of their enclosed trailer. Long story, it was a project that wasn't really a great fit in a lot of ways. Learned a lot of things after the fact. So a project like that, where there's other companies that make these things in small batches, and for us to do something like that here, because you got to put the design hours in, not just the manufacturing hours. And then if there's an oversight, you're into more design hours. So the more you try and rush things, the longer they end up taking, because you're duplicating parts or reworking parts and also using more material. So short answer is, small jobs cost a lot more. Actually, a friend of mine that's a senior estimator for commercial buildings made that exact point, in terms of, you've really got to double because you're spending more travel time. Everything proportionally goes up for small jobs. You're sourcing a little bit of material, you're trying to match a little thing. You still need to go to the store, buy the paint, get the color matched. All these little steps that, if you're doing a bigger job, you wouldn't see a lot of those office hours and things that really add up. Even the time to do a small job, and knowing how to do shop minimums here, in terms of spending the time invoicing and looking at, oh wow, if we spend 5 minutes invoicing, how much is that worth? And it's easy for the cost of writing the invoice to be worth more than, someone, if they want some nuts and bolts. And it just doesn't make sense from the perspective of keeping the door open. So there's some challenges there. Try not to focus too much on minimums, but we do have minimums that we try and maintain, just to have some guidance to recognize that things do cost money in this world right now, and that's where things are at. But for people who go out of their way to help out, we're always looking for ways to reach out and help people better. So that's long-winded answer. So when there's a large quantity of something to produce, it makes sense. Or sometimes if something's really simple, sometimes it makes sense. Or if someone has gone out of their way to help us, yes, we will do everything in our power. And not to say we don't care about people who haven't helped out, but there's also, at this point, just running day-to-day operations really takes so much focus that if we let our focus just go everywhere, this place isn't going to be around to help people. So Projects okay. So this question somehow part of it got cut off. Projects I would want to work on with my close friends. So yeah, I love building things. Actually, there's a 4-H club that happens here in the shop right now. So it's kind of like having some, there's that aspect of friendship, people choosing to be here because they're interested. Projects I want to work on with my friends. I like working on a lot of things. Actually, some friends and I used to have a shop night back in the day, and it would range from, sometimes we'd be working on one another's cars. We made a boat trailer for a good friend Matt. Sometimes, actually, when everyone had those little Sirius radio things that would go in their car, we were often making aluminum brackets that would tuck in and connect with some fasteners to avoid having to put holes in the dash, and yeah, making things nice. I like making little retrofits, sometimes tuning up a little part of a bicycle or making some little brackets on things, some machine repairs. I like doing things that are a good fit for the shop where we have the tools for, or when it's not a big panic and it's interesting to take some time thinking about how to put something together. Those projects are fun. Woodworking can be fun. Projects that are quiet, a lot of assembly, bolting things together. That's also nice work. Oh, the vision and mission. Yes, actually, it's right. Oh, there it is, there. Actually, a good friend, Perry, made the point. I'm on a board with Perry, and Perry said, at the beginning of every board meeting, being a chair, go through the vision and mission. And it's great in terms of getting everyone centered, getting everyone focused. So there's the vision and mission on the wall. Hopefully you can read that. If not, that'll be more in upcoming videos. So, what would you like to produce the most? I think the thing that amazes me the most at this point in life, as far as some kind of new modular housing, something could be built, climate controlled, in a shop environment with overhead cranes and a lot of entry level tasks. So, like Henry Ford, and a lot of people came in off their farm, worked on the Ford assembly line, built the thing, were able to afford the thing they were building. And that happened over 100 years ago. I mean, Model Ts is 1923. So 1923, I mean, Ford was full on production, very refined. People could go to work there, be able to afford the thing they were building. And there was a lot of standardization, which was very wise. And, I mean, aesthetically, a 1923 Model T, there's a lot of people who love that automobile. It's still beautiful. It's got a nice design. And in some ways, it's still relevant today in terms of, if you looked at that, you would say, oh, I recognize that. That's a car. But yet, we have not done that same thing with housing. I mean, you look at human evolution and hanging out with people who were into tracking and primitive skills. I remember years ago building a debris hut out of, you take some branches and then you cover it with more branches and then you get leaves and more leaves and pile that thing up and it looks like the biggest squirrel nest ever. And then you pour some water on with someone inside to see if that's actually anywhere near enough leaves, and it's usually not, and then you get more leaves. Our ancestors knew how to do this stuff. Somehow we lost this. It's interesting that animals, we look at ourselves on top of this pyramid like we're smarter than animals, yet how is it that animals provide their own food, they shelter, they know what to eat, they get lots of exercise, they're active, they have their little animal communities, they build their own housing. Yet humans, actually in animals, they know how to navigate, they don't need a vehicle to travel around where they need to go. It's really profound, yet how as humans have we not made a point in our society to free up those things? A lot of times we focus on things that aren't geared towards our health, to our well-being. I mean, the kinds of processed foods we eat and the things in our culture that we focus on, a lot of things around appearance that are superficial, things that I question so much. What made someone think, putting a plastic hubcap on a vehicle makes an improvement? Where does that come from? I mean, it's interesting. Way back, you look at where hubcaps started. Sometimes it was to cover something that was going to collect mud and make something a little more aerodynamic. And then there are a lot of decorative hubcaps that were made out of stainless steel or chrome plated that really had some beautiful elements to them. But then where did so many things go out of this where it's just this plastic thing that looks like this? I'm trying to think of even the word, like some kind of a spaceship on the wheel in terms of the holes and the designs, and that's a tangent. So anyhow, there's certain things where it's just, how do we get the idea that this is improving our lives? Why not just make some really nice steel wheels and paint them well and just be done with hubcaps and not be taking them off to change tires and do brake jobs. Anyhow, I'm going down a rabbit hole. So I would love I love the idea of a sheltered workshop in terms of working with people on a deeper level, taking a time out when things aren't going well. Yeah, just being there. I think that would be a really cool thing for producing something that connects with people's needs, people's day-to-day well-being. A lot of people connect with others. And I know as an entrepreneur, when things get really tight, knowing that if I knew that my housing was guaranteed, that I was going to have food for sure at the end of the day, that I was going to live in a place that's warm, all those things haven't always been a given, which is really what I want to see for everyone else, and not have to go through uncertainty around their housing, their food, their heat, their medical care. To really focus on those things is more of a first principle. Anyhow, what do you like best? Well, sharing wisdom, teaching, spending time with students. That's really been fun. It's something that has also been great, where I get to see where my edge is at in terms of making things fun, entertaining, rewarding. There's that. I love the book Flow, where it talks about the peak state where it's most enjoyable, where we're walking that razor's edge between our competency and our incompetency. So I also might say a term like stretching our edges, just seeing where that edge is, where our comfort level is, just going a little bit beyond it, or as far from it as we can without getting overwhelmed. And that's one thing I really enjoy, helping other people face where their edges are at. And yeah, I know in some ways it feels like my skills aren't growing as fast as they once were. And I feel like as much as I wanted to gain some certain welding skills when I was younger, a lot of things I wish I had have learned, it just never happened. I don't feel that driven to make it happen at this point. And I would also sooner invest in other people gaining those skills and having more reciprocity. I think that's something one thing when people ask me, hey, what skill do you wish you had? It's not hands-on skills. I wish I had more skills connecting, meeting others, working with others, understanding what drives people, understanding how to help people meet their needs better, understand themselves better. Those are the things. That's the stuff. Anyhow, I also find I'm more enthusiastic when other people are around, so that's a big thing. Okay, so what are your major challenges today? Well, I could say something's really straightforward like cash flow. You know, there's often a lag between invoicing something, money coming in, which one thing we've done to improve that is getting a Square credit card reader so we can do Interac and credit card payments. And sometimes, you know, if someone forgets to pay their invoice, even though there's credit card fees on those small purchases, that it's still easier than following up on a small purchase. And it also, I think, is going to allow us to bring our minimums down in some way, as far as we don't need to sort out change or make a complicated purchase process. So I think that's going to help. And it might also help us track what sales we generate so we don't need to write up invoices right away in the same way or have them entered into the system the same way. I think it's when we get it refined, it's going to help with our invoicing system. I guess that's how I want to say it, because everything gets invoiced, everything's got tax on it, everything needs to be, after being audited by the Canada Revenue Agency once, I tell you everything, the better everything is set up and organized going into the audit, the better it all works out, the less things are questioned. It's like I was once told when I was at the tail end of my apprenticeship, well, somewhere in my apprenticeship, friend Daryl said, you know, make sure when you make a part, everything looks nice. You know, if there's a little gouge or a ding, or you didn't file the corners smooth or deburr it, you know, that part will get more scrutiny because it doesn't look as good. So, well, I'm not into looks or being superficial in a certain way. There's also something for quality and showing people that we care and demonstrating that and knowing how to communicate that. So that's the same thing with Canada Revenue and having the books nice. And also, you know, having an accountant that wants to take on the work as far as doing the accounting part. You know, if things are disorganized, who wants to deal with that? I know if it looks like someone has just run something into the ground and they bring it here and they want it fixed, I don't know if that's a good fit. And I don't know if it even feels respectful in terms of if they're not going to hose something off before it comes in here to get worked on. You know, if they're not even going to do that, how can we ask someone else? I mean, I like what I've learned from lean manufacturing as far as everyone cleans the toilet, have that equality, have that humility. But there's also that if the people we do work for aren't showing us a certain level of respect, then that can be a really challenging thing. So anyhow, that's another tangent I'm going on. So, challenges. So the other one right now is we have limited space designated for junk. And there's one of the principles of lean manufacturing, if you don't have a spot for your junk, that it's going to be in your workspace. And if there's things that are too good to throw out and you're hanging on to them, sometimes it makes sense to leave them in your workspace because otherwise it's going to be on your mind. You're going to be regretting it more that you threw it out, or it's outside getting wrecked or blown around in the wind. So that's a challenge, having proper space. And attracting the right people, still been a challenge. Enjoyed having co-op students from the college, from the high school. But just having people here maybe on a once a week basis or twice a week, every day, once a month, especially people who have some business insight, some wisdom, some patience, who don't have so much to prove. I know one thing I've learned from having this shop is working with retirees is one of the best ways, in my opinion, to grow a business. Yeah, Because while they might not be wanting to work night and day, the way they work will be much more methodical. I mean, and a lot of chances they've got their heart in it. Not to say an apprentice won't have their heart in it, but their wisdom and experience as balanced. And I know as I've gotten older, safety has become more of a central focus. Or when I was young, risk taking, not even knowing what risks were. So that's one thing I really love about retirees, patients. They don't need to come away with a wage. They often realize their own interests, projects they want to work on their own. So it's often a really good fit in that way. Yeah, so I think that's a challenge in terms of connecting with more retirees that would be a good fit to work with. That would be something I would really enjoy. And having retirees around also is really great when there's co-op students. In terms of having someone who's a patient listener, it just really gives that grandparent energy to the space. I don't always convey it, and I don't always have it, because sometimes I'm rushing from one thing to the next. Not often, but sometimes it happens here and there. So the other thing that I find challenging, staying connected with people, especially people who have helped out, whether it's been in my personal life and really connects with this place, and yeah, people I meet, and sometimes I get feeling really shy, or I feel like, oh, I want to achieve a certain thing before I go and reach out to that person, and then time will go by, and more time will go by, and the more that time slides, the easier it is to just let that thing drop altogether, and it's not top of mind. So yes, reaching out, I can feel shy, feel apologetic, or feel like I'm an inconvenience, especially if I know someone's got a busy schedule and someone I really respect for some like industry wisdom, and I might try and reach out to them. And if it doesn't happen and they don't seem to be jumping at the chance, a lot of times I'll drop it feeling like, yeah, maybe I'm not good enough for them. So owning that as far as my own judgments, my own personal growth needs to happen there in order to feel that worthiness, in order to communicate value, in order to really recognize that there is some value in it for others, and that it's all right to ask, and it's all right to keep knocking on the door or casting the fishing line over and over again. And the worst that can happen is someone could say no. If someone yelled at me, which is one thing I can get afraid of, that someone's going to be mean, when we recognize that's really about others, it's not about ourselves. That said, we've got to embody that on a deep level, because if it's not fully realized, half the time we're going to feel it's about us, and half the time we're going to be more buoyant, realizing it's got nothing to do with us whatsoever. So yeah, it's not necessarily simple saying, well, it's really about others. Well, it's nice to silver lining it like that, but if you're feeling it's breaking up a part of you that regrets and feels bad like it does on me, then that's that dark storm cloud that I want to share with other people like that. Yeah, I get that. It can be tough. But that said, this too shall pass. But not trying to speed past it, avoiding the feeling of it, go down to the feeling and do a little digging to get out of that hole a little bit. So, here's another one. Another challenge, accepting help. Sometimes I find it challenging to say, yes, if you don't mind. Actually, a neighbor of mine cleared some snow around the building, and I haven't even reached out and said, hey, thanks so much. And it reminds me of growing up, there were a few people that would go around, maybe they have their farm tractor and clear people's lanes really quick. And there's that saying in Buddhism, if I have a gift and I go to give it to you and you don't accept it, who does it belong to? Well, if it's still in my hands, it's still mine. If someone goes and clears a driveway without being asked to, and then they hold it over that person as far as they owe something back, that wasn't really a gift. And that wasn't really an empowered, tactful action. It's one thing to live life from a place of generosity and wanting to inspire reciprocity, but it's a huge downfall to expect reciprocity or to feel vengeful, invisible, when other people don't appreciate what we've done. If we're doing it to try and feel appreciation from others, if we do it just for the love of, here I want to live a life of service, that's beautiful. If that's working for someone, that's great. But when it needs to be recognized or reimbursed, and there hasn't been a conversation, it reminds me of one of my favorite phrases lately, talk about budget early and often. Still working on that. So anyhow, this neighbor who cleared the snow the other day, it got me thinking of childhood and expectations, and sometimes I feel like I would do something nice for others, and then, like say for instance, if I had cleared snow one day, and I think, oh, now I gotta clear their snow all winter, because then it wasn't really genuine me doing it that day, that there was just a little light dusting of snow. So things can really get skewed, taken for granted. Anyhow, so asking for help, that can be a real challenge. And even recognizing the way that some people might really just love to help out, and that talking about budget early and often, talking about taboo things, having the approachability for people to say, you know what, I like doing this, I like doing it to a certain point, I like doing it in these hours, but anything else, not so interested. Or I'd love to help you, but I'm not really into your vision so much. If you shift some things over here, I would be interested. So really having those conversations, that I think would really up my game in asking for help. I feel like there's so many things that people would love to see happen in this world. Just knowing how to have better conversations, how to get people connected, involved, have a sense of ownership. Those are things that I find I'm learning. It's a learning curve. So, accepting help. Yeah, talking about how to honor the help that's received. I think we touched a little bit on that earlier. Yeah, talking about budgets. I talked about that a little bit when I was talking about accepting help from others. So, talking about budgets, yeah, bring that up at the beginning of the project, not feeling like I've got a quota price, asking people, hey, you say you want this done, just throw it out there, what's your budget? And if they don't really want to answer that and ask me what it costs, it's probably not a good fit. If someone doesn't have the idea in their mind of what it's worth to get that thing up and running, I think I would sooner look for people who are at that point and say, it's worth somewhere between $50 and $100. It's worth somewhere between $300 and $500. It's worth somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. And starting that conversation, at least having a range, then well, what features does it need to have between that range? Well, if it's on the $15,000 range, it's got to be automatic. If it's on the $10,000 range, I don't mind if there's got to be a very unskilled operator watching the thing, making sure it doesn't break. Oh, wow, great. And if it's at the $10,000 range, I want it to be so it could be automated over the next 5 years. Oh, okay. And just having little pieces of that conversation, knowing how to have those conversations in a really fluid way. So that I would say was thoughts about budgeting. Well, okay, last question. What happened with the compost spreader? Well, that was a prototype. It was a project. For people who aren't familiar with that one, it was years ago now, and I honestly can still feel embarrassed and disappointed, and like it was a letdown, and want to be invisible. Yeah, so that's a whole subject for a longer, more in-depth video. I had to write something out. It's one of those things where I have more of a sense of humor. I can laugh about it as far as sometimes I'll get inquiries years later in my email inbox, and a lot of times I'll just put them in a folder that's marked compost spreader. And that was another thing I learned in terms of, someone can send a message, you don't have to answer it. It's polite to answer it, but it's not necessarily rude to not answer it, especially if we know some of them we're working through. If we got 20 things we're working through, and some of them we're working through need to honor paying the bills, paying what other people have provided, lent, paid forward, then it's just one of those things that we have to discern, especially if you're an entrepreneur. Parents always have to decide these things. No matter what we're doing in this life, we've got choices and doing the best we can. But there's also looking beyond the choices we're making to see how we can do more with the same resources, with the same hours in the day. We all have the same amount of hours. What we choose to do with them, vastly different between people. Anyhow, that's a Q&A for this time. I'd love to do more Q&A later. Feel free to try putting questions in the comments below, and I will make an effort to answer those questions. This is the first video I've done in over a year now, which is another thing that's embarrassing. So I'm going to try and put together the best content I can. I feel like there's got to be a lot of content that's mediocre before there's content that's great. Hopefully this is watchable. Try not to be too wordy and go on too many tangents. I like this content or this format in terms of it kept me somewhat focused. And I guess the more specific the questions are, if there's multiple questions within a question, I can probably stay on point way better. I would say that for certainty. If there's a question that's got a few questions within it, probably more chance that there is a very concise answer that will come about. So, on that note, thanks so much for joining. Thanks so much for checking it out. Thanks so much for supporting this YouTube channel and Community Machinery. And until next time, yeah, and maybe comment on other videos you'd like to see. I've been thinking about, it'd be nice to talk more about my favorite tools. Something I intended to do way back. It never happened. Now I'm going to make an effort to do that soon.